Expected points, clean sheet odds, captaincy, and the best players to buy. This video has got all the information you need to know before game week 25. Right, we're going to start off this video then by talking about the top players for expected points by position, as I do in every Ultimate Guide video. So we've got the goalkeepers up first. Both players with a double game week. Alisson and Ederson are the top goalkeepers for game week 25. Question marks, of course, around Alisson's availability. He missed the game in game week 24 with the flu. I think he probably is back for game week 25, but we need to make sure what Klopp says in his press conferences. You know, we need to check that he's okay. Ederson's in second place. I think that's fair. His fixtures, I think, are slightly worse than Alisson's, and he makes less saves. Realistically, the only points you're going to get from Ederson are for keeping clean sheets. One of the Liverpool sub-goalkeepers is in third place there. Flecken in fourth. Pickford in fifth. Kaminsky, Raya, Martinez, Steele, and Vicario are the top goalkeepers. On to the defenders, and another player to watch out for tops the list. Trent Alexander-Arnold obviously got subbed at half-time in game week 24. Klopp said that he was feeling the same pain in his knee that he was feeling when he was out for a few weeks earlier on in the season. I think really question marks around his availability and minutes now for game week 25. But I do think with the upside he has, I can see why Draft Hounds still have him as the #1 player. But I mean, ultimately, we need to understand what the nature of the injury is yet. Klopp said he's feeling the same kind of pain he did before, but it's not. He doesn't expect it to be serious. I mean, ultimately, we just have to wait for the week to play out to see what Trent's availability is going to be. But then the list is dominated by Liverpool and Man City defenders. Ake and Virgil, the two fit picks, if you like. And then Doty's in there at the bottom for Luton. 6.8 expected points for him. On to the midfielders, and Foden just takes the lead over Diogo Jota at the moment for expected points. 13.9 expected points for Phil Foden, around 12.7 for Jota, and 12.2 for Luis Diaz. Interesting to see Salah up there as well. I do believe that he will be fit to play some minutes in game week 25. I think he probably either gets subbed on in the first one and then starts the second, or isn't quite fit for the first one and gets subbed on for the second. It's, I think, a bit hit and miss really as to Salah's minutes. So obviously, similar to the other Liverpool players, we'll hopefully get some news in the press conferences this week. I do think, you know, if he's looking like he's going to start the first fixture, it's going to be really difficult not to go for him. Although, I do think with a blank in game week 26, if you can't get to Salah easily and have to rip up your team to bring him in, I do think you can go without him in game week 25. You know, he's 13 million. He's really expensive. If you've got Haaland already, I think you're going to struggle to squeeze him in. So if he is fit, I probably wouldn't worry about it. I actually think De Bruyne could be a better option. He's a little bit cheaper, and he's probably going to play more minutes. He's got the joint same expected points according to Draft Hound. We've got Doku, a player that hasn't been spoken about much, but we've got Rodri in there on 8.8 expected points. Now, of course, Rodri isn't massively explosive, don't get me wrong, but I do expect him to notch up at least one attacking return over the double game week. I really do feel like, you know, Pep is giving him a bit more impetus to get forward. He's shooting in quite a lot of games from outside the box. You obviously know the winning goal he scored in the Champions League final, right? So he can pop up with goals and assists in any game, to be honest. And he's the one Man City midfielder, given that Pep Roulette is in full force at the moment, he's the one Man City midfielder that you can back to start both games and probably play 90 minutes. Ross Barkley's in there, Bernardo Silva and Curtis Jones round off the top midfielders. On to the forwards, and it's no surprise to see Erling Haaland top of the pops. 15.3 expected points for him. We'll move on to it in a second, but I mean, the only question with this week is, do you actually triple captain Erling Haaland, I think? Julian Alvarez in second place. I do think he'll get decent minutes. He's started every Premier League game so far this season, so I mean, I still think he's decent if you've got him, which 29% of the games still do. Darwin Núñez is in third place. I really like him as an option alongside Tony. 9.1 expected points for him. I wouldn't rule out a return in either of those games for Tony. I think he's brilliant. And he's relatively fixture-proof. Scored a couple of goals at the Etihad last season. Was dangerous in the reverse fixture this season. So, yeah, I wouldn't rule out some goals for him. Adebayo, Morpie, Ogbene, Morris, Watkins and Brown from Luton round off the top forwards. Now, as I was saying, the only real question for me this week is, rather than just captain him, do you triple captain Erling Haaland? And I'm of the right mind to do so. I think if you're really chasing and your rank is poor and you want to, increase or whatever, then I do think you could go differential. But for me, an opportunity to triple captain Erling Haaland when he's fit, finding form again, and will probably start both of the games. I mean, ultimately, they've got Copenhagen this week in the Champions League. Anything could happen in that game. If Haaland limps off with an injury or, or whatever, something could happen in that game, right? And then that changes things. But if he gets through that game relatively unscathed, I think he'll be fit to start for against Chelsea. And I think he'll do the same against Brentford. And with those two things in mind, I think you should just play the triple captainship, to be honest. Couple of differentials in there. I mean, Phil Foden, he's a risk. I'd say he plays less minutes than Haaland, to be honest. Diogo Jota and Darwin, I don't mind. Luis Diaz, I just don't think he's explosive enough for attacking returns. I think Jota and Darwin are probably a little bit better from a goal scoring and assist perspective. But, I wouldn't rule out Luis Diaz. Alvarez, I think when you've got Haaland in the fold, you can't really go for Alvarez, sorry. One thing just on the triple captaincy as well, I just wanted to look at the upcoming fixtures because another opportunity potentially to play the chip is using it on Solanke in Game Week 28, right? You can see there, they've got a double against Sheffield United and Luton, both games being at home. But I just think there is so much that could happen between Game Week 25 and Game Week 28 that I wouldn't want to leave the chip, basically. Who knows, right? If Solanke gets injured between now and Game Week 28, what are you going to do if that's when you're planning to triple captain him? We might have a double game week coming up later on in the season. That could occur in game week 34 or 37. But by that time, for all we know, Man City could have the title wrapped up and then Haaland doesn't see any real Premier League minutes. So I just think there's so much that could happen for the rest of the season. If there's a decent opportunity to play the triple captain chip, as we can see there is this week on Erling Haaland, I think we should probably use it. Moving on from that, we've got the clean sheet odds. You can see there, a couple of teams with double game weeks at the top. Man City, a 45% to keep a clean sheet against Chelsea and 55% to keep one against Brentford. Liverpool, a 38% and 55% across their double game week. Arsenal at 50%. I'm not going to put them in my players to buy list because I think it makes sense to talk about the double game week players, right? But they're looking really good defensively, and from set pieces, they're really, I think they've scored 15 goals from set pieces this season, right? They absolutely dominated West Ham, a big team, a team that you expect to be good from set pieces, right? They absolutely dominated them from set pieces. And I think both Gabriel and Saliba carry real goal threat with them now. And with Burnley away, I think they could take on the big double game week defenders, particularly considering, Liverpool aren't keeping the great level of clean sheets at the moment. And with Man City, you don't really know who's going to start for them. So, if you don't own one of Saliba and Gabriel, particularly considering they play in Game Week 26 as well, and they're pretty much nailed on to start, I think you could well buy them instead of a double game week defender. Everton, 45% against Crystal Palace at home. I back that. Crystal Palace not looking great at the moment. Brighton, we've got Sheffield United away, 36%. Tottenham are 33% against Wolves. Man United and Newcastle both above 31%. Usually, I don't like to back teams anywhere below 30% to keep a clean sheet, but I'd probably say Aston Villa have a chance against Fulham away. I think if you've got Martinez or a Villa defender, you might well be starting them this week, I think, compared to some of the others. Luton and Brentford, the other two double game week teams. I mean, look at that. 18% for the first game and 8% for Luton in the second, and 13 and 8 for Brentford. That tells me you shouldn't expect a clean sheet from either of these teams. So if you're picking a defender or a goalkeeper from Luton and Brentford, really you should do so because you expect them either to get an attack in return or make a lot of saves, make up for the lack of clean sheets with saves bonus alone. All right, then, I'm just going to talk about my top transfer targets for this week. I mean, for me, obviously, if you don't have Erling Haaland, based on what I've said, I think it's an absolute shoo-in to get him in your team, provided he gets through the Champions League games unfazed, right? Probably the best asset in the game right now with Salah not being fit and Son just getting back to form for Spurs. He's a triple captain option for sure in Game Week 25, and he's got the best expected points for the next 5 game weeks. I think if you don't have Haaland for Game Week 25 at this point, you're going to be hiding behind the sofa for the game week. I think you could probably get away, maybe without owning some of the other City players, and possibly the Liverpool ones because of the rotation. But given how consistently, Haaland was starting last season, Pep Guardiola sticks him in the team whenever he is fit, right? And I think he's probably the most nailed on City attacker. Like I said, if he gets through the Copenhagen game unscathed, I think he's going to start both games of the double. 16 goals from 17 starts, over 1 expected returns per 90. He's just fantastic, isn't he? I'd say, in my opinion, Phil Foden is probably the second best Man City asset. He's got 8 returns in his last 7 games. Obviously, the guy is in phenomenal form, but the whole of the Man City squad is fit at the moment, right? And that makes it really hard to, pick a player that you will think pick a player that will play the most minutes, basically. And I think there are 2 Man City players that are probably nailed on to start both games of the double, right? That's Haaland and probably Rodri. Both of those I would back to start both games of the double. Outside of that one, Edison, of course. But outside of that, I think it's anyone's guess as to who's going to play both. But I do think with the form that he's been in, the way he's been playing, the fact he can play multiple positions in the Pep Guardiola system, and the compliments that Pep has been giving him in press conferences and just in the media in general, I think Phil Foden is probably the midfielder in FPL for Man City that's going to get the most minutes and probably get the most points as well. When you look at Kevin De Bruyne, don't get me wrong, obviously I think Kevin De Bruyne is fantastic, but I do think across the seasons his returns are going to be more weighted towards assists. And obviously goals are more points bearing than assists, right? And I think Foden is going to, based on that, he's going to score more goals and therefore probably score more points than Kevin De Bruyne. That's just my opinion anyway. I think he's probably the second best Man City asset in FPL. But like I said, if you're picking him, you have to do so expecting some Pep roulette. So don't be surprised if he doesn't start one game of the double, but I do think he gets some minutes in both games. Now, probably my third favourite Man City asset, I'd say, and a lot of people might be eyeing him up for game week 25, and that's Kyle Walker. I would say he's definitely looking a bit more attacking than previous seasons, and I'm actually seeing City missing him when he's not in the team. He can make some really good driving runs from that right back position just with his pace and power alone. And I think the way Pep usually sets up with, obviously Walker plays on the right. He's not a centre back, but sometimes he can play with a back 4 like he did against Everton with 4 centre backs. I think that can be a bit lacking from an attacking perspective because, yes, they're all good on the ball, but they can't really make a driving forward run like Walker can. And sometimes that's what you need to get through a defence. And I really do think both, obviously defensively, he's amazing in the 1v1. But going forwards, I think City really do miss him when he's not in the team. And he is probably, I say this dangerously, he's probably the most nailed on Man City defender in the team, I would say. Obviously, we know that Pep Guardiola's roulette is in full swing, right? So don't be surprised if he doesn't play both games of the double. I put him in because I know he's going to be popular. For me, I don't think I'm going to be buying Kyle Walker this week. I'm going to go back to what I said on the clean sheet odds. I think that the Arsenal defenders, just because you can absolutely back Saliba and Gabriel to play every game, and they've got probably a bit more goal threat than Kyle Walker does. I know they only have a single in game week 25, but going forwards with their ownership and nailedness in the team, they don't cause a headache at all. If you think beyond game week 25, you're always going to be a little bit worried that Kyle Walker isn't going to start for you. And he's probably going to be a player that you might want to sell for that reason. So for me, I think, yes, it's a good opportunity to have him for a double. But maybe, Arsenal got Burnley, right? Given how they just blasted West Ham 6-0, what could they do to Burnley? I just think, although it's only a single game week fixture, Arsenal defenders could be better than Kyle Walker. Got to talk about Darwin Núñez, haven't we? He's putting up some really, really good numbers across the season. He's got 8 goals and 9 assists from 15 starts. And I know a lot of people in the media, in the Twitter world and social media, etc., are dissing Darwin Núñez for being poor. But looking at those numbers, you can't deny he's had a good season, even if he has missed a lot of chances. One thing I would say about him as well, he took the penalty for Liverpool the last time Salah wasn't on the pitch. And I've got a feeling he might take the next one, even though he missed it. I think he's due an absolute monster haul at some point, and owning him for 2 games in a single game week, you definitely increase your chances of catching that. Obviously, the downside, he misses a lot of chances. We all know that. And with the amount of players Liverpool have got for that front 3 positions, particularly with Salah potentially coming back into the team, they could have 5 players to play that front 3, those front 3 positions. So I would say his minutes are a little bit in doubt. But given the form he's in at the moment, both him and the player I'll talk about next, I think are the most nailed on. I think, to be honest, it's Luis Diaz, Núñez and Jota that will be the starting 3 for both of the fixtures. That's just my opinion, of course. I just think he's a great option. And given how dangerous and explosive he looks in most games, obviously he misses a lot of chances. Similar to Haaland, really. I think if you don't own him for double game week 25, you're going to be scared about him. The other Liverpool player that I personally really like is Diogo Jota. Obviously, Luis Diaz is a good option, but I think both Darwin and Jota just seem to be in and around the goals and assists a little bit more. Jota's putting up some fantastic numbers for the amount of minutes he's played. He is an absolutely lethal finisher. He's massively outperformed his expected goals, as you can see there. And that seems to be a thing with him across his career. It's not just, you know, a one-season wonder. He is a really class finisher with left foot, right foot, and his head, right? He's fantastic. And I think alongside Darwin Núñez, he could feasibly start both games of the double. And I think overall, given how dangerous he's looking and how clinical he is with his finishing, I think he's probably the best Liverpool asset, particularly considering he's a midfielder compared to Darwin being a striker. He obviously scores more goals, or scores more points for scoring a goal, and gets points for a clean sheet. Obviously, there's question marks around his minutes, like I said. Potentially 5 players being fit for Liverpool for 3 positions. I still think he's a really nice option, though. Now, I've waxed lyrical about him in videos previously, so I'm not going to spend too long on it, but I really do think Ivan Toney is one of the best forwards in the league. And just the fact he's nailed to start for Brentford, takes the penalties, plays 90 minutes, and takes the free kicks with no Mbeumo in the squad as well. He's a really nice option. He's got a double in 25, doesn't blank in 26, and he plays a fixture in game week 29 as well. He's relatively fixture-proof, like I said, when going through the forwards. I'm pretty sure he scored a brace at the Etihad last season, and he is really good. Brentford, in general, really show up against the big teams, so I wouldn't rule out a goal. Obviously, it's doubles Liverpool and Man City, but I wouldn't rule a goal out in either of those games, to be honest. 4 starts so far this season after returning from 8 months off. 3 goals and 1 assist. 4 attacking returns from 4 starts. Absolutely fantastic. And the beauty with Toney is you just set and forget. You do not have to worry about him playing games, getting minutes. He's on penalties, so he can score in any game. He's a fantastic option. So the players I just went through there are my personal top picks for game week 25. I think those are the players I'd be eyeing up to buy. But what I thought I would do is just put out my top targets from the 4 teams that double this week. In green, I've put the players that I think you should really consider buying. And in orange, there are the fringe players that, yes, you could buy them, but I'd have a little bit of doubt about them. So like I said with Liverpool, I think Jota and Darwin are the outstanding 2. Diaz is probably in between green and orange for me. Trent, obviously, with his knee injury, who knows what's going to happen with him. I think maybe if you even own him, you should consider selling him depending on how that injury goes. Virgil van Dijk, he's going to play both games, but, you know, Liverpool a bit weakened defensively, particularly if Alisson's not in the team. Is he even going to keep clean sheets? Salah, I mean, his minutes are in doubt right after the hamstring injury. Alisson missed game week 24. Robertson, I think he might play both games of the double, but he's not been massive for attacking returns. You know, the right back for Liverpool has been the one that's been getting forward with Robertson sitting back a bit. And, you know, returning from quite a lengthy injury, his minutes are probably going to be managed. For Man City, I think Haaland, De Bruyne and Foden are the best 3. I think Foden's probably a little bit better than De Bruyne, but I can't say that De Bruyne is a bad option, right? I think he is genuinely pickable. Alvarez, although he started every game of the Premier League season so far, I'm just a little bit unsure of his minutes with Haaland back in the team. I do expect to be proved wrong there, though. He's started every game. He's the only Man City player, Rodri hasn't even started every game, has he? He's the only Man City player to have started every game in the Premier League this season, right? So, yeah, I think he's a good option. But I just doubt his minutes with Haaland being back. Walker, I went through him before. Edison's going to play every game. Likewise, Rodri. I just don't see enough points coming from them to make it worth it. Luton, a lot of people on Doty and Kaminsky. I mean, you can understand it. They've got a double in game week 28 as well. I just don't back Luton to keep clean sheets. They kept 2 clean sheets all season, right? And if you're owning them, you're expecting attacking returns and saves. I don't think they're going to keep clean sheets. I do think Morris is a good option. His style, his physicality, he could give any defence in the Premier League problems. And he's on penalties, right? So that gives him an opportunity to score in any game. And he's nailed on. Plays 90 minutes every game. He's a decent striker as well from open player. I think he's a nice option. The last time Luton had a double game week, as we know earlier on in the season, he did really well. So, yeah, he could be a nice option. Brentford, I think the only real pickable player for Brentford is Ivan Toney. Reguilon, I do quite like him, but again, we saw the clean sheet odds. I think you're relying on attacking returns from him. And then the rest of those players on that list for Brentford, I don't think I could buy them. So, yeah, Jota, Darwin, Haaland, De Bruyne, Foden, Morris and Toney, I think are the real pickable players with a double game week. All right, and that's the end of the video. Quite a lot to get through there ahead of the double game week. I think this is one of the most exciting game weeks of the season coming up, to be honest. All the expected points are flying off the charts. They're some of the highest we've seen so far this season, if not, to be honest, the highest. So I think the score should hopefully be quite high for this game week. Let me know in the comments if you're going to triple captain Erling Haaland. I think that's going to be a really popular play this week. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like rating. Let me know in the comments what you think of those players that I described at the end. And yeah, subscribe to the Goal and Goal channel if you want to see more content from me. It should be just there. And I will catch you in my next video.